We've got all three of the candidates' supporters in the studio this evening because we do like to be fair on this show. So our first backer of the evening is Mims Davies, who is Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities, and she is backing James Cleverly. A very, very good day for James Cleverly, but he has some big choices to make as well in terms of who he wants to fight in front of the members.
Well, good evening, Andrew, and good evening to everybody listening. It's been a really important day for our party, and this matters, as you rightly say, to be a good opposition to this feeble Labour government who have misstepped rather heavily in the first 100 days. But more importantly, to, as you also described very rightly in your top lines, about making sure we're fighting the next election. I've got an ongoing by-election right now. We've got really important county and other local elections this spring. So we need to come together behind a candidate that can unite that party, our party, and put the confidence and positivity back into the Conservative Party.
Now, if I wasn't Andrew Marr, I am Andrew Marr, but if I wasn't Andrew Marr and I was representing one of his opponents, I might say, trouble is that James has been very, very much associated with the last few years. He's been Home Secretary, he's been Foreign Secretary. You know, he's tied up to a point to what happened under Boris Johnson and the rest of it. He is old news.
Well, I've been a minister for several years, and I've got Andrew Bowie next to me, who's been a minister and very front and centre, as have others. So, yes, I think one of the things that James said very rightly at conference is to have the confidence about what we've delivered in government, and also to put the confidence in back, knocking on doors as a Conservative, having the confidence to sell our policies. I think we've been doing too much navel-gazing and too much talking about ourselves, and it is about talking about what voters care about. Cost of living, the NHS, what their local schools are like, what their local roads are like, and making sure that all those promises that Labour have put together and already come away from, that we actually hold them to account. That's what voters expect.
Now, Mims, I thought the biggest applause moment he had during his conference speech was when he said absolutely no deals with Nigel Farage, no deals with the Reform UK party. People really liked that. But that's a bit of a hostage to fortune, is it not? Because there are so many naturally Conservative voters who have gone to Reform, and one way or another, you have to win them back.
I think that was James's message, absolutely right, about making sure we win back our voters. I think those sitting in the studio tonight, without some of our colleagues who we would have loved to have had return to Westminster, it's because too many of our voters didn't come out for us or indeed turn to other parties. And I think James has been very clear about putting the confidence into Conservative values, being a Conservative councillor, activist, MP, and I think we've lost our way somewhat. And he has said that he will bring us together, and I think he's the best candidate to do that. Look, we're going to get what we're given. It's right that we're arguing for each candidate. And I must say to Tom and all of the other candidates that are put before us, I think we've had a very good election. I think we've put ourselves back front and centre. Yeah. And thank you to all of the teams and all of those people working to put that positive Conservative message back into front and centre of people's minds, because that really matters.
That's a very good message to end on there. Of course, it's easier when you've got the wind at your back, perhaps. But let me turn now to Andrew Rosindell, who's backing Mr. Jenrick, Robert Jenrick, and he must be a little bit disappointed today. He was the front runner last time MPs voted, and he's way back today.
So it seems to me that there is a divide on the right of centre within the parliamentary party. You could argue that Kemi and Rob are both representing that sort of wing of the party. Now, if you add those two votes together, of course, you're looking at more than 60 votes, which is more than half of the parliamentary party. So I think that it's very complicated at this stage, and I think some people are voting interesting ways to try and engineer certain outcomes. I think tomorrow will be much more revealing.
An interesting use of the word interesting, if I can say so. I guess one of the problems for him tomorrow, however, is with those 20 Tugendhat votes up for grabs, he had a real fight with Tom Tugendhat over what he said about the SAS. That got quite nasty for a while, and so he cannot be expecting very many of the Tugendhat votes to come his way.
Look, I wouldn't like to say that, actually. I think there are people on all sides who would not necessarily back the person they back to begin with. They shift around. So you can't really say that. I think Tom has a multitude of supporters, and they could go in all kinds of directions. I think the key thing is this. Robert has a clear plan. I've listened to all 4 of the leadership candidates. They're all good people. I know them all very well. Rob seems to me is the only one with a very clear and forthright plan to take the party in the direction we need to go to have a hope of winning the next election. It's pure mathematics. We can't win another election if you have 2 right-of-centre parties. You have to ensure the Conservative Party is actually a Conservative Party. It's no good talking about unity if we don't have a common purpose. So let's get that right first, and then we've got a chance of winning.
So to get that right, would you and your team, as it were, do some kind of arrangement or deal with Reform UK?
I don't think that there should be any talk about doing any deals with anyone at the moment.
At the moment?
I'll tell you what, though, I put my country first before party every single time, and in 3 or 4 years' time, choice of another socialist government for 5 years, then we should look at all options. Nothing should be off the table, but that's not a discussion for today.
Andrew, I'm listening to you very, very carefully there, and I take away from what you're saying that in due course, some kind of arrangement with the Reform UK party is perfectly possible.
Look, our electoral system is first past the post, and that means you cannot have 2 right-of-centre parties and expect to win. The vote divides. We've lost so many of our colleagues this time because Reform, my vote was cut in half. And many of my colleagues lost. I don't want that to happen again. So the priority for whoever's leader is to rebuild the party, recapture that territory we've foolishly pushed away. The party moved to a really weird position. I've been an MP 23 years. I can't understand what was going on with the last government. We did some amazingly silly things which were simply not Conservative. No wonder our core voters have run away from us. So we need to have a clear purpose again to get them back.
So do you think there is a danger for Conservative politicians who, as it were, abuse Nigel Farage, that voters who went with the Reform, who are natural Conservatives, feel themselves abused and are turned off by that?
They do. It's very, very wrong to be rude to Nigel. It's very wrong to attack people that decided to vote Reform this time. They're actually part of our family, really. They normally vote Conservative. We pushed them away. We failed on so many policies. Highest tax in 70 years, level of tax. Immigration, we completely failed to sort that out. Whole load of issues people are disappointed over. We are to blame for this situation, and it's no good talking about unity unless we have a clear purpose. And the clear purpose must be to have a right-of-centre government again in this country. That will only happen if the Conservative Party actually decide to adopt clear, strong Conservative policies. And I'll tell you what hasn't helped, I'm afraid, for James, is the fact that we're giving away one of His Majesty's territories. Now, how is that going to be anything that a Conservative Party can proudly talk about? And that was under the last government that we paved the way for this, and now Labour are completing the job. That, to my mind, is completely against everything we as Conservatives should be standing for.
Andrew Rosindell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really interesting, that. Now, finally, to somebody backing Kemi Badenoch, the Shadow Veterans Minister, Andrew Bowie. And we now know it's never Badenoch, it's always Badenoch. Is that right?
There's no bad in Badenoch.
No bad in Badenoch. Now, clearly, Mr. Cleverly has enjoyed a bit of a boost after the party conference. His speech went down very well. But I thought that Kemi thought her speech went down very well as well. The danger for a lot of your colleagues is that she has said too many things. And we've heard talk about maternity payments, and we've heard talk about jailing civil servants. And above all, we've heard talk in her speech about rebooting the entire system of government, including the National Health Service. Now, that will be taken by many people to imply some kind of change to an insurance-based system. Now, your voters would really hate that in Scotland, wouldn't they?
Well, yes. But, just to say firstly, yes, James had a very good conference. He had a very good conference speech, and he's had a really good result today. And I think what's marked this leadership contest out has actually been the civil way that it's been conducted. I think all of the leadership candidates that have stood for this position deserve our utmost respect, and I think also they deserve credit for the way that they've conducted themselves throughout this entire process. We are having the debate that we need to have within the Conservative Party about who we are, what we stand for, who we speak to, and what we offer the country when it comes to general election in 4 or 5 years' time. And that's why I'm backing Kemi, because I think Kemi is the only one who is serious about the threat that we face as a party. We're being the Reform, as you've said, have parked tanks on our lawn, but we also lost a huge number of seats beats the Liberal Democrats. I don't think anybody really believes that the SNP threat is completely gone away in Scotland. So we need somebody that's able to cut through, that's able to speak to the country, that isn't afraid to take on Keir Starmer, take on Nigel Farage, take on Ed Davey, and take on John Swinney in Scotland, and ensure that conservatism flourishes in the next decade and well into the 21st century. And I believe that person is Kemi.
Now, like your fellow Andrew Rosindell from the Jenrick camp, you are going to have a very, very busy 12 hours ahead or so. Just explain to me actually what you guys will be doing when you're trying to win over these 20 Tugendhat voters.
Well, I mean, always. There's no change.
Pouring out bucks. How do you go about it?
Well, I mean, it's just a case of talking to colleagues, finding out where they are, finding out where their priorities are, what they want from the party moving forward, and where they want us to go, and then trying to encourage them that whatever that is, it's best to vote for Kemi Badenoch in the next round.
One question, really, I'd like very quick answers from all of you, that there's always a danger in these things of dirty tricks, really unpleasant stories being suddenly thrust into the papers. All the campaigns were brought together by the whips earlier on and said, none of this, none of this. Can you all guarantee that you are not going to be pushing out bad stuff about your opponents over the next 24 hours?
Well, I wouldn't trust Mims not to do that. But other than Mims, I'm sure none of us would.
Look, I think people are standing on their own merits. And obviously, Andrew referred to the Chagos. Look, at the end of the day, that decision was taken by a Labour government. And you would expect anybody who was foreign secretary to be doing having those conversations. No, but that's the point. So, but we will all have to absolutely be working on the positives of our candidates. And, for us, we need to be putting forward the positive Conservative argument. And that's what I think James is all about.
I think, actually, that's what I
agree.
Sorry, let give Andrew Rosindell a go.
Absolutely. I like all the candidates. We all got on well. We're all friends. We're all in the same party, but we have political differences. And I'll tell you the problem with our party is that everybody goes into a mushy area where no one quite knows what we really stand for. And when we just had this election, knocking on the doors, people no longer knew what the Conservative brand was all about. Yeah. I'm afraid, Mims, giving away a British territory to a country in cahoots with China is the last thing we should do. And we were going to do the same in power. I'm afraid James has to take responsibility for that.
All right. You heard there just a kind of segment, a whisper of what's going to be said in private rooms around the House of Commons as people engage with each other all evening. Tomorrow will be another day, a very, very important and an interesting day for the Conservative Party. Thank you all very much for coming in.